Do you wish that you had done anything differently?
A few, too few to mention, as Sinatra put it. You know, I don't have kids, and for a while there, I was like, oh, I definitely have to have some kids.
You know Mike Rowe, but do you really know him? You are about to get to know him like you've never known him before. I'm Kara. I used to be a therapist. So when I talk to somebody, I really like to talk to them. Let's go.
To me, when that job became fun was when I stopped trying to sell the product and amuse the viewer and focused instead on amusing myself. I learned that on QVC, and I remembered it years later on Dirty Jobs. You know, the trick to that show was to amuse myself, the person I was with, and my crew. And once we got that down, then the viewers of the show, they felt less like viewers and more like people who were along for the ride.
Right. So
And
I'll
that's
tell you what, too. What I did before when I knew I was going to talk to you in a couple of days, I was like, let me see what Mike's fans think about Mike. What do they want to know about Mike? What do they think? What's their approach? What's their relationship with Mike? And I have to tell you, yeah, what do you think I discovered?
I look, if you went to my Facebook page, you found 6 million people with varying opinions. I mean, it's a biased crowd, but most of those people are there because I did something that they like. Um, but I don't know. What did you find?
So I think it's more than that you did something that they like. I think they really feel like they know you. It's like what you're
No.
saying. I feel like they really 100% they know Mike Rowe and they know him personally. Like that's how they feel. So there's something that you're conveying and it's interesting because when you said that that's what you learned from QVC and applied on Dirty Jobs, I think that may be why they feel that way because you just were you having fun back and forth with the people who you're actually working with and they got to just tag along and feel like they're there with you.
Well, thanks. And I do think that's a part of it, but I also think the way we shot Dirty Jobs was very, very different. And it's the same way we shoot 6 Degrees. We always have a behind the scenes camera that's wide and shooting everything all the time. And I always know that that camera's on. And so when we stop a scene or when we have to break for any number of reasons, that camera still rolls. And in those moments, I'll walk up to that camera and I'll tell the viewer the truth about whatever's going on in that moment. That level of disclosure
Yeah.
was really unusual on nonfiction television.
Mhm.
Um, and the more we did it, the more permission we got to do virtually anything we wanted. The other thing that really helped me a lot and mattered a lot later was that on Dirty Jobs, we never did a second take. Um, we never did any pre-production. We never did any writing. We never did any casting. You know, we never told, you know, the artificial inseminator where to look or where to sit or how to do their job. It was we were flies on walls, you know. And my feeling was take two is a performance because it's just an attempt to repeat what you did in take one. And so I just didn't want to do that kind of a show. And the viewer realized that too. And so they knew that for better or worse, what they were watching and what they were seeing was exactly what I saw on the turkey farm the
Yeah.
day
Yeah.
I showed up. And so
It's real. It's real.
it's
Right. It's
real.
as
I mean,
real as you're going to get. And that's right. That's
yes.
again, the connection is who you really are. You're presenting who you really are. And that's part of it. So I'll get into that after. I want to tell you about some of those Facebook fans because, yeah, you have like a ravenous Facebook fan population out there and it's huge. I mean, you got onto Facebook what at the beginning or?
No, I was late to the party.
Oh, okay.
I'd like 2010, 2011 maybe.
Yeah.
But what I did do at the very beginning of Dirty Jobs in 2003, the network called and said, "Look, we want to build a chat room," which struck me as super creepy. Like, but we
Yeah.
think, we want fans of our shows to have a place to go to talk about the show, and it would be nice if you kind of weighed in once in a while. I said, all right, whatever. Well, what happened was, out in the world, doing a dirty job, you go back to the Motel 6 or the Super 8 or, wherever you're staying, and you're tired and you open the mini bar, you get a beer or whatever, you sit down and you get in this chat room and you start really chatting with viewers. And I didn't think I'd like it, but I actually loved it. And from that chat room emerged all the ideas for season 2. And so I realized before Facebook, back when Zuckerberg was still in college, I guess, that if you let the viewer program the show, they're going to be way, way more engaged than they otherwise would. And if you let them host the show, which is how I always thought of Dirty Jobs, I was the guest, the viewer, the subject was the host, and so everything was slightly skewed from the normal model. But when the dust settled, it was a show that allowed me to say, look, this show is produced, programmed, and hosted by the people who watch it. I'm just an avatar. And that, that really stuck. And so later, when I got on Facebook, that lesson had deeply landed. And I realized, oh man, this is so much bigger than a chat room.
Right.
So, yeah, there's 6 million people on my page right now.
That's so right. That's so interesting. And especially because Facebook is sort of, like Facebook is the old platform. And, there's a lot of controversy about Facebook. And it's going strong for you, for sure. There's no question about it.
I do a show for Facebook called
Yeah,
Return
right.
to Favor.
Right.
It airs on, the thing's been downloaded 400 million times.
Yeah, that's wild. But again, everything's
I won
changing.
an Emmy. I won an Emmy for a show that's not even
Congrats.
on TV. How much weirder does the world
Look, the
get?
times are changing, but that's, you're obviously going with it. You're trying new things, doing different things. Discovery Plus, that's a whole new thing too. I mean, that's like, everybody's got a streaming network, but I really feel like it's happening for a reason, and then people can get what they want. So there are, I'm sure, tons of people who are going to love Discovery Plus. It's exactly more of what they already love. It's perfect all in one place. So,
Yeah.
and your show is going to be on that.
Yep.
The whole landscape is different. I have some serious questions I would like to ask you.
Sure.
Questions. I'd like to go a little bit deep.
Oh boy.
Oh, what did you just write?
I just wrote "going deep."
Look like a check mark.
Sometimes I just doodle crap. I just sit here and I wasn't writing anything.
I
was doing the classic news anchor move.
Right.
Mike Rowe here, signing off. We'll see you tomorrow. And then I just turn down and write and nothing.
I love it. Then you whisper to the person next to you and say nothing. I got
nothing.
It. Right.
Or something deeply inappropriate.
Right. Maybe not these days. Maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah. Right.
So any regrets in life? Do you wish that you had done anything differently?
A few, too few to mention, as Sinatra put it. I don't have kids. And for a while there, I was like, oh, I definitely have to have some kids. And then I really, got to know the kids that my friends had. I don't want kids. So I didn't have kids. And sometimes I think I should have, maybe I'll adopt one, but it's not a regret. It's just a choice, career wise. No, I don't have any regrets at all. Mm-hmm. I guess, I've lived in like 20 states, and there's some places I would have liked to have stayed longer, and there were some places I probably never should have gone. I was a hobo from 1993 until 2001. Lived in hotels, lived in studios, recording studios. I mean, it's a good life. I'm not complaining about it, but I was very, very, very transient for a long time. not a regret, but it was just kind of a weird time in my life. And, I'm not, I'm not sure it was really time well spent, but not a regret.
Right, right. That's so interesting. Right. So it's like you reflect on them and you wonder, but you don't necessarily regret.
I had fictitious, there's a fictitious character called Travis McGee who stars in 22 amazing pulp fiction novels. In fact, right over here, I'll show you. This guy, John D. MacDonald, wrote the best pulp fiction ever. And he created a character named Travis McGee who lived on a houseboat down in Bahia Mar, Florida, and basically solved crimes. He was just this boat bum who had a great philosophy of the world. And one of the things that he did in life, his fictitious life, was take his retirement early and in installments. So when he was in his 20s, 30s, and 40s, he would always take a couple of months off in between adventures. And I just remember being so enamored of that lifestyle that I actually embraced it. When I left QVC, fired for the third time, I started taking jobs that let me travel, and I started freelancing. And in between the jobs, I would basically just goof off for a couple of months. And I I looked at it as, all right, you're going to wind up working for the rest of your life. You might as well
Right.
enjoy your retirement in little chunks now, just like Travis McGee. So, do I regret those years? No, I don't. But I
Yeah.
really do wonder what I might have done had I actually sat down and applied the work ethic that my foundation today is so focused on.
Right. But see, here's the thing. I think that what would be much more common is if you didn't live like that for that period of time, you would regret it. Right. I think that if anything, people look back at times when they didn't try something like that, or they didn't run free, or they didn't follow their passion. And that's what they regret. So I think it's not surprising that you don't regret it. And if you didn't do it, I think you might have regretted it.
It's just greener grass,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Well,
The grass is
always.
always greener. It doesn't matter what you do. But I'll
So,
tell you, go ahead.
a question. Okay, so what about the kids? At what point did you think to yourself, should I adopt, should I have kids? Is this something that I should be thinking about, or do I want? What was that process like?
It was a long time ago, and I was with a girl at the time who was absolutely sure she wanted them, and that made me look at our relationship, in a way that I wouldn't have otherwise. I didn't want to be unfair to her. She was, I mean, we were in love, but she was very clear. I'm on this earth to have 2 to 4 kids, and I want you to be the father. And yeah, I just remember thinking, wow, you want me to be the father before you want me to be your husband.
Oh, that's interesting. So
Somebody asked
that,
me
yeah.
s- somebody asked me the other day about my parents. My dad's 88, my mom's 83. They're still together, they're still vibrant, they're still doing what they do. And they said, they asked me what their secret was. I'm like, I don't know if they had a secret, but there was something that my dad was very clear about to my brothers and I as we were growing up. It was very clear to us that he loved us. He loved us a lot, and he would do virtually anything for us, but he loved his wife more.
Oh, it's so interesting. Okay, that was clear.
Crystal clear. And so clear that it didn't strike me as strange growing up. It was just the way it was. Dad loves mom, and then he goes away and makes money so mom can raise us. And this is how it works. Dad also loves us, but dad loves mom first. And when I look around today at so many of my friends who are raising their kids, I'm really struck often by the fact that the kid has become the most important thing in the household. The kid has become the most important thing to the parent instead of the spouse. So I was
That's
lucky.
it. Yeah, that is interesting. And I do think that's, that's part of a product of the times of how everything with the prioritization of kids, the helicopter parenting, all of that together, it's sort of like upside down, right? I remember a time when I was at my son's soccer game. I don't remember how old he was. He was little. And I remember all the parents were on the sidelines just watching these kids. And the field was like a little bit raised compared to the seats. We all brought our own little like carry-in seats. And I
Yeah.
remember like looking around thinking, this is really like fundamentally upside down, that we're all here looking at, cheering on, like the people who are the big focus are the kids, these little kids. And it was really just that activity in and of itself would be harmless, I'm sure, fine, but it was representative of what's kind of going on all over the place in all, like you're saying, in the house, outside of the house, activities, whatever else. I do think that's a thing that it never was before.
No, and it's like the frog in the boiling water. It just got worse and worse. Like after the soccer game, not only are people still staring at the kids, they're applauding as every one of them gets a trophy, right? And every, they to grow up certain that you're the center of the universe.
Yeah, that's
Well,
tough.
I mean, I guess maybe it's good for self-esteem to some point, but no, that's not the way we were raised. It was
Right.
you're not the center of the universe. Mike, you're not the center of anything. The universe is a very big place, and you're a comet just kind of burning through, or maybe you're a planet stuck in orbit. But you are not the center of you're
Yeah.
not the sun.
Well,
Sorry.
I don't think since you grew up that way, you don't seem to me like you have a confidence problem, right? A self-esteem problem at all. So knowing that you weren't the number one doesn't seem to have impacted you in a negative way.
Well, look, it's a journey, right? I mean, I stuttered until I was well, I stuttered badly till I was 12, and then I stammered all the way till I was like 17. And I was very shy as a kid, remarkably shy. And uh, not a commentary on my parents at all. They were terrific in every way, but uh, I needed I needed another influence in my life when I was in high school. I had my grandfather who was next door, who built the house I was born in without a blueprint, who was a genius, and that's who Dirty Jobs was actually um, inspired by and dedicated to. And my parents, who were great, but I had no connection to the entertainment world and no interest in the entertainment world until a high school teacher named Fred King literally took me by the scruff of the neck and made me sing. Can't stutter when you sing. And as it turns out, I could carry a tune. And he kept me after school, and he taught me how to sing. And then he forced me to audition for a musical. Oh, it was a nightmare. And I told him, I said, look, I'm never going to get through these monologues. He said, you'll be fine. Get on stage. He put me on stage, this guy, and I got 20 seconds into a monologue. I'm kind of stammering along, and he says, Mikey, love what you're doing with the part, but the character you're playing, the character doesn't stutter. So you can do that Porky Pig stuff on your own time. Just do this without the stammer for me. And without thinking about it, I mean, it was an impossibly glib thing to say, but without thinking about it, I trusted him so much. I went back to the top and I did it without the stammer. And 20 seconds in, he looks at me like maybe you could choose to act like a guy who doesn't stutter if you don't want to stutter. And it was one of those like, oh. And so I I kind of chose to be somebody different,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
you know.
So like purposefully, right. You were like, I'm gonna be this guy instead.
I'm going to be this guy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and then I started auditioning for all sorts of other things. I got in the opera. I sang for
Yeah.
8 years in the Baltimore Opera, you know, and that I wasn't on a path to do any of this, as a kid. I just wasn't.
Yeah.
It took a completely separate uh, force of nature to redirect me and then kick me in the ass.
Right. Okay. So back to my deep questions again. So personally, what's one of the lessons that you've kind of learned upon reflection about relationships? Like, did that one relationship teach you anything? I don't want to tell you what the lesson was, but was there any lesson that you gleaned from or about relationships?
Yeah, you there's no such thing really as cheating on someone. We hear it all the time, and it's happened to most of us. But the person you really cheat on is yourself. And everything that follows that is symptomatic. That's an early lesson, you know, and you realize it, and you either change your behavior as a result or you don't. Um,
That's a really interesting lesson and good advice. And lots of time. I think it applies to other things too, in a
it applies
sense.
to everything.
Right.
Look, I mean, Eleanor Roosevelt said, nobody can make you feel bad without your permission.
Right.
It's the same sort of thing, you know. I
So is
was
this
talking.
you? Did you? I don't want to get too personal. Tell me if I am. Did this happen where you cheated on somebody else and then you learned that that was a mistake?
No, it's the
No,
other
the
way.
opposite.
It was the other way, and I guess I was in a position where I was pretty sure the relationship was going to end anyway, at some point. And then I learned this thing had happened, and then she was very, 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 very sad about it, and sort of apologized and said, "Look, I've done this thing, and I've cheated on you." And because I mean, I was hurt, but I wasn't devastated, and I I was in a place where I thought, well, you know what? Maybe there's a magnanimous thing to say here. Maybe this is my way out of the relationship, which I know is going to end anyway. And I remember saying, it sounds so paternalistic looking back on it, but I said, no, look, you didn't cheat on me. You cheated on you. And for that reason, um, of course I forgive you. And I hope you can forgive yourself too.
And that's what you said. Like right. That was your first reaction. Good for you. What?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Well, I drove home later, pulled over, threw up, cried, felt like complete, you know, garbage for a
Yeah.
couple of days. But, it's I, once I kind of got rid of the stammer and got into the entertainment world and was trying to find my way,
Yeah.
I I did this thing where in my personal life, I don't know why I'm telling you this, but
Oh, I was a therapist. That's why you're telling me this. I used
Jesus,
to be a therapist before I did this.
well, you really
That's
put me
why.
on the couch there, didn't you, Kara?
Sorry.
No, it's all right. I would imagine sometimes in private moments, intimate moments, sometimes just during a banal dinner, I would imagine cameras in the room, and I would imagine the moment in my life as a scene. And I wondered, how would that scene be shot? I didn't know anything about filmmaking, but how would we be a medium shot, tight shot? Would that be on a jib? Would that be, how would we capture this scene? And once you start thinking about the geography of your life in terms of a scene on the screen, then the next thing you think about is, well, what would I say? What would I say when the camera comes in and the ingenue looks at me and tells me that she cheated on me? Well, it depends on what kind of character I want to be. Do I want to be a stammering, stuttering, weeping victim? with big snot bubbles coming out of his nose and the whole lip routine, you know. I don't want to be that guy. I didn't want to be that guy when I was that guy. And
Right.
so in a moment like that, and believe me, I didn't unpack all this in real time, but when I look back at some of those moments in my life that felt like, wow, that was instructive. That was a seminal a seminal moment. Um,
But yeah,
yeah,
yeah. But
I
that's
find
interesting too.
I
Yeah, go
find
ahead.
myself saying things that I think would play well on the page or on the screen. Not necessarily, not necessarily things that I actually feel, but I'm trying to get the scene to end in a way that leaves me a little dignity.
That is so interesting that you right. I think that's the product of two things, right? It's like you're saying with your background in TV, it makes you start thinking that way, but also it's like what your teacher did. He was like, "Who are you going to be?" Right? So you that really sunk in. You have taken that with you, not just about the stammering, but you have taken that with you. It sounds like your whole life.
Big lesson. Big lesson.
S-
You look, we're works in progress,
Yeah,
you know,
all of us.
right? And people love to say, ah, you know what, people don't really change. No, people change.
Oh yeah. Yes.
People change.
By the way, so true. I mean, not everybody does. Some people don't, right? Some people don't. They choose not to. And so they're not going to. They're going to be the same forever because that's what they want to be. But I have seen more changes in people over time than lack of change. So I agree with you
Why?
about that.
I mean, yeah. Why don't people see the prospect of becoming a new thing as liberating? Why do they see it as something terrifying?
So that's an interesting question. And I do think it's much more common to fear change than to embrace it and look forward to it. So by nature, me personally, I love change. I live for it. And if I don't have it, I'm miserable. So like stagnation to me in all forms, it just doesn't feel good. I love when things are changed up. So
So,
it's hard for me to know, to understand them, to
yeah,
relate. As
I
a
don't,
therapist, though, I should have an answer, right? What do you think?
well, I don't think cookie cutter advice is ever good, he said in a cookie cutter advisory way. Um, I think it's one of the great, um, I think it's just a terrible thing we do to people when you take a piece of advice that might make sense for somebody and then turn it into a platitude or a bromide or a trope. Um, you know, I think all the time now of these, you know, the successories, right, that you see on, right. So it's like, let me think of it, a good example. Okay, you said it earlier. Follow your passion. Follow your passion is something we tell our kids. It's something that you can see everywhere on 1,000 different pieces of swag and posters and all sorts of other things. But is it really the best thing to say to the most people? I mean, if you watch American Idol, my God, episode one, you see thousands of people following their passion because for 20 years they've been told that if they want it badly enough, they can have it, you know, and if you don't have what you want, you just aren't passionate enough. And so many of these people learn for the first time in their lives that just because you're passionate about something doesn't mean you can't suck at it. And they realize on national TV that they can't sing. And this comes as a great shock
Right.
because they've been told they're like the kids playing soccer and they
I was
get
thinking exactly that. Right.
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 They've got the trophy. There's all this reinforcement. I'm the center of the universe. What do you mean I can't sing? I was told there would be cake, right? No, you can't, right? So, you know, one of the things I did on Dirty Jobs was revisit all these old platitudes and try and come up with an alternative take on advice. In fact, that poster, I swear to God, I had no idea where we're going here, but
So,
that
right, we're on the insemination poster. Yeah, yeah.
it says at the bottom, don't follow your passion, but always bring it with you.
Oh, that's
Because
interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
look,
Oh, that's interesting.
if passion is truly important, then you would never want to be without it. But if it's all important, then you're going to follow it around. And where is it going to take you? Maybe someplace great, maybe someplace where you don't have the requisite skills to actually thrive at the
We
activity
could,
in question.
yeah, we could even use that in the personal arena too, right? Because sometimes you may have that passion towards somebody who's not good for you relationship wise,
All day
right?
long.
That's
All day
almost an
long.
easier example. So like I'm big on, I believe in listening intuitively to yourself, right? About what you want to do, what you feel is important, what you feel is right. Like I really am all about the inner voice. And I think that's just the therapy, that's why I became a therapist probably. I don't know, one versus the other, cause and effect. That's another conversation. But where am I going with this? What did I just say? I totally lost my train of thought.
That's the sign of a great conversation. Now, I can either try and guess where you were going, or I can save this slightly awkward moment by giving you the exact example of the thing you're
All right,
talking
fine.
around.
I like awkward moments sometimes because they're real. Like you said, I give real. By the way, to my viewers and listeners, I'm all about giving them real, just like you do, but in a different way. So I'll let them hear the awkward moment and then I'll also let you save it. So what have you got?
My inner voice, when I was a kid, told me with extreme clarity and persuasiveness that I would follow in my grandfather's footsteps. My granddad was the guy I mentioned who lived next door, who built our house without a blueprint. He dropped out of the 7th grade in 1916 or something and went to work. And by the time he was 30, he was an electrician. And after that, he became a plumber, steam fitter, pipe fitter, mechanic, just a master tradesman. He's the kind of guy who could take your watch apart and put it back together blindfolded. I was sure I would follow in his footsteps. And from 12 until 17, every day I worked as his apprentice. I helped with all the activities and all the construction work that he did. And I bitched up everything. I wasn't a disaster, but none of it came easy. And one day I messed up the pour on a foundation, got the concrete mix all wrong. And he said to me, Mike, you can be a tradesman if that's really what you want. Just get a different toolbox. And that was the advice that really prepared me for Fred King, who said, here's the first tool in your new toolbox, learn to sing. And so the big lesson for me was I had that inner voice and it was telling me what to do. And my skills simply were not commensurate with my dream. And that's a very, very painful time. That was my American Idol moment when I realized I'm not going to do the thing I was sure I was going to do or be the person I was sure I was going to be. And then you enter the wilderness where you have to figure out, well, then what then are you going to be? Because if the identity you chose for yourself turns out to be a dry socket, then you got to replace it with something. And so that's kind of my journey. Was I had certainty and I had passion, but I didn't have the skill that I needed for the thing I thought I wanted to do. Interestingly, I did have the skill for a thing I wasn't interested in doing at all. So
Mhm.
I had to learn how to like TV and how to like performing. Um, and I did. It was just backwards for me because
Mhm.
my voice changed early. I got rid of my stammer and I was narrating these documentaries all over the place. People thought I was 40 years old. I was 20.
Yeah,
And
it
so
is interesting, right? And that's true too, right? So you don't always know, but that's another example of people do change and things change, life changes. You just picked up your pencil again. Wonder what you're thinking about writing down now. Should you take notes?
I'm just thinking, if I had to talk about this for
Yeah,
8
you could
minutes
do it
again,
forever.
could I do it?
Of course you could. So, getting back to your narration of your life, your personal life as you're living it, using your narrator's voice, your who am I going to be voice. So what about your personal life all these years? There's a lot about your professional life, but what's the track? What was the course of it? What has the course of it been as you've built your career?
Well, on the romance side, I've always been a bit of a serial monogamist. And I've always been attracted to women who were fairly certain of who they were and what they wanted. Um, this is kind of a therapist thing to say, but some people are attracted to C's because they're a C, and when two C's get together, they make an O, and everybody wants to be an O.
Wait, so we're talking about the personality types here.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay.
More or less. I mean, I'm saying I've always looked for people who were already O's because
Okay.
I see myself as an O. And when an O meets a C, it gets weird because they don't fit. C's attract each other, O's attract each other. I look for O's, at least historically. And so I find them because, of course, when you tell your brain to go look for something, it'll find it. And so I found women who were immensely tolerant of my Travis McGee take his retirement in advance life, at least
Oh,
during
that's interesting. Right.
that period. Yeah.
So tell me more about that. Right. So they were very flexible with that, which
Yes.
do you look back and analyze?
Second guess some. Look, I mean, yeah, there's always the one that got away story. I had a particularly fascinating couple of years when I was working for American Airlines back in 1995. I was doing all the in-flight entertainment on any flight longer than 3 hours. This was when the airlines realized that real estate at the front of the plane was really valuable. And so they sent me around the world to do whatever show I wanted in the cities that they served, the big cities, Buenos Aires, Sydney, Perth, Bruges, didn't matter. I would go with my cameraman and a crew would meet us there. And I had something called a D3, which was a must fly. So I could, in 1995, walk up to any gate for American Airlines, show them this pass. They would make a call, confirm the code, and me plus one were flying first class to wherever that plane was going. You
Sweet
must
deal.
fly. Sweet deal, right?
Yeah.
So I did the show for about a year and a half, and it was great. And then new guy came in, show got pulled off, and they licensed Seinfeld. But in the confusion of the transition, they didn't take the D3 back. So from 95 to 97, I was single, working in my chosen field, taking my retirement in early installments, and dating. And the kind of date that I was in 1995 was the kind who would say, "Oh, Carol, you want to grab breakfast sometime?" Sure, you'd say. I'd say, "Great, I know a place in New Orleans. Let's go now." And so we go to the airport before 9/11. There's not a whole lot of rigmarole. You just show them the thing. They walk you on the plane. They sit you down in first class. And at this point, you're like, "Who are you?"
Right.
And I say, "No one of any consequence." And so, it was a great time to date because I could fly anywhere in the world for free. And yeah. And so I did. And I met some really interesting women in those days. And did I see them exactly for who they were? Did I, was I looking for, a wife, or was I just doing my best Travis McGee?
Right.
I don't know. But again, not a regret.
Right. Just a thing, just a reflection of what it was.
Just
So
a
what
time.
about now? Serial monogamous still? Are you with somebody now? Are you?
Yep.
Yeah. Long term.
Yep. Yeah. And
And O?
oh yeah. Oh yeah. Although, yeah, maybe. She might be a K.
The heck is a K? What is a K?
Well, when you put a K next to an O, it's okay.
Oh, or is it a KO?
Or a KO. That's very good. A knockout. Huh. Very clever of you, Kara.
Oh, thank you. It just came to me. So how's your relationship then? What's the have you learned things from it, or how has it changed? Are you in a better place now to have that non-retirement chunk? I don't
No,
know.
no, no, no,
No.
no, no. That whole thing. Look, I'm living my life backwards and upside down.
Okay.
I'm working harder now. I'm 58. I'm I'm working harder now than I ever have in my life. Pandemic potentially notwithstanding, that's obviously colored all sorts of stuff. But I do a show called Somebody's Got to Do It. Dirty Jobs is headed back on the air.
Yep.
Returning the Favor is in production with Facebook. 6 Degrees is now on Discovery Plus. And I run a foundation called MicroWorks that's been around now for 12 years, and that takes up every spare minute of time. I owe Simon and Schuster another book. Um, right. So, I mean, my old business model completely crap the bed, and everything that I thought I knew I wanted to do, my retirement and early installments, all of that whole business model completely failed when Dirty Jobs became a hit. And so,
Right, right.
yeah,
But
I
that's
mean,
very lucky that you got your retirement in early.
it's very lucky too that I didn't have any real success early. I mean,
Yes.
not that I'm like
Right.
it, but you
Right.
know,
And not that I'm saying you weren't successful early, but by nodding my head and saying yes, but that's absolutely true. I think that when you look back again with these regrets, no regrets, not regret, because again, you were able to have the retirement and early installments. You're able to have this now, live it in reverse. Um, so yeah, it is interesting. Are you a reflective person normally? Like, do you do a lot of thinking about yourself, especially if you're busy? I would think that may be a little harder. Not so much, or what?
no, I'm fairly
No?
self-absorbed. I've given it a lot of thought. um, and in fact, I thought you were just going to say that. I mean, that level of navel gazing and that level of reflection often, these days anyway, seems to lead people to conclude that everything happens for a reason. And I'm not that guy.
Uh-huh.
Um, I'd be more inclined to say the reason everything happens is because you choose to do it.
Yeah.
I don't feel like there's a cosmic plan or some celestial thumb in the small of my back pushing me and guiding me. Um, it's it's kind of pleasant to think that you're part of a larger plan, but in the end, I think most people go through periods where they're empowered by the notion of free will and then terrified by it.
Okay, tell me more about that. That's interesting. Terrified by it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's very liberating to know that the world is your oyster, and you have every opportunity to go in whatever direction you want.
Mhm.
It can also be terrifying to be in that exact position, depending on what you've just come out of and what kind of life you've had. I used to think that career wise, the dream job would be a network who said, Mike, gosh, we're such fans. Why don't you just take this money and do any show you want? And we'll put it on the air. I used to think that level of autonomy and creative permission was the goal. But another one of the QVC lessons that I didn't realize I learned when I learned it was no, no, no. You, for me anyway, you need sides, you need parameters. So my reputation on QVC was one of a devil may care comedian who worked the late night shift and
Yeah.
was kind of an anarchist who did everything, you know. But the truth is, if you compare me to lots of other people on TV, I wasn't outrageous at all. I didn't do anything particularly interesting. But if you compare me to the people who preceded me and followed me on that 24-hour broadcast, I was outrageous. So what I learned and what I later did, you know, with Discovery was I realized where the lines were. I realized the expectations for a QVC host were actually very rigorous. And the expectations for a Discovery host were equally um, baked in. All the hosts behaved the same. They all talked like this, right? They all wore the same basic thing. Everybody it's kind of like a news anchor. You know, we all kind of fell into this archetype.
Right.
And what I learned was it's fun to change the archetype, but you can't change the archetype unless you're surrounded by examples of it. And so Dirty Jobs stood out because it was surrounded by a certain anodyne kind of sameness and
Got it.
predictability.
Got it. That makes sense.
Now, how does that translate to women? How's it
Yeah, go
translate?
ahead. Bring it back to women for me, Mike.
I think, man, how does that translate to women? If a woman tells me that anything's possible, that she's game for any kind of adventure, she's standing by to prepare any type of meal, that her entire strategy to please me is to say yes, regardless of my request, then we'll part friends. Because that woman, she's not really interested in pleasing herself first. She's trying too hard to please me. She's a C, not an O. And so people who let you know what's important to them and who make it clear where they stand with regard to standards, expectations, whatever you want to call it, those people are more comforting to be around because you know where you stand, you know what they value, and you can then choose to please them or disappoint them, depending on your own proclivities. So I do think, I think there's a parallel between the way you look at an opportunity and the way you look at a job and the way you look at a mate. You know, you either know where you stand or you don't. It's better to know.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's interesting. So how do you feel about talking about this personal stuff? Is that like a...
Well, you know, I can't imagine anybody cares, really. It is fun to look inward. It's a little tricky for me, just on a practical level, because I have been for the last 8 or 9 years dealing with what you call some stalking issues.
Oh, that's something.
Oh yeah. And it's manageable. It's always been manageable, but it's the downside of being yourself. If you have any level of celebrity, you know, it's always been a nightmare to me to imagine being like Gilligan, right, on Gilligan's Island, or you know,
Okay.
some famous person who became famous for a character.
Right. Right.
Now you have to live your whole life with people seeing you as this.
Right. George Costanza.
That's right. That would drive me crazy. People who know who I am or who think they know me actually do, because I'm not a character.
Right.
Better or worse, all this blah blah blah, it's me. And
Yeah.
you know, I'm forthcoming here. I was forthcoming on Dirty Jobs and really everywhere. But the downside of that, The upside is you don't have to ever pretend to be someone you're not.
Mm-hmm.
The downside is when you come into someone's home vis-a-vis a screen, you might be in their living room, their kitchen, you might be in their bedroom.
Yep.
And when you're yourself, that connection is real. And for some people, it just lands in an unhealthy, unnatural way. And I learned that at QVC too. That was a very, very interesting dynamic. A lot of lonely hearts watched that channel.
Oh, so how did you know? How did they reach out to you?
Oh, well, I mean, letters in those days, lots and
Okay.
lots of letters. And then, it's not a terribly difficult thing, even back then, to find where somebody lived.
That's
People
really
showed up.
tough.
Oh,
So
yeah.
now, do you have like stalkers, plural?
Yeah, I
Oh,
got a
you do.
couple going right now. Got a couple restraining orders out there. And so my girlfriend works in a completely different industry. And she has really very little interest in in what I do. And
Which is maybe really good.
yeah, I mean, it has been.
Yeah.
She's bemused, and I'm bemused by her. And so, we kind of came from this place of shared bemusement. Um, and now, because I do what I do, life's a lot simpler when she uh, stays on the front line of, say, legal documents and things like that.
Got it. Got it.
So,
Right.
so I live pretty much under the radar, um, and that's by design. So I don't, I leave her out of it. It's a deal we made a long time ago, and I don't talk specifically about who she is or what she does or anything like that. Um, but it's easy because I've never been a Hollywood guy. I lived there for a while, but I've always tried to stay out of the machine,
Mm-hmm.
and she has no interest in the machine, and that's made it easier.
That's good. But those stalkers, though, that's not good. So they still, even with her on all this stuff, they've still found you, I guess.
This is a level of yes is the answer, but you have to. I mean, I'm sure you've seen this in your own practice, but there's a real phenomenon that's kind of unique to television, where people um, believe you're talking to them in a code.
Oh, okay. I didn't think that was what you were going to say. Okay.
No,
What?
this is a level of um, disconnectivity, and I thought it was super strange the first time I saw it, but I've seen it a bunch, and people think when you do and say certain things on television, use certain words, everything is accompanied with a subtle kind of wink. I'm talking just to her, uh, and that eh, there's some sort of term for it, I'm sure, some sort of disassociativeness,
Right. Right.
but it's real. And so, yeah, men and women, people are sure that I have engaged them in a conversation that has nothing to do with anything that's being said.
That's so interesting. But you can't let that stop you, I guess, right? You still have to keep doing your thing, but you have to kind of block it out to some degree, I would imagine. But it's like I was saying before that the vast majority of people do feel like they know you, but that's another level entirely, to think that there's some sort of special conversation going on between the two of you. But that is exactly like you're saying. That's part of it's the ups and downs. It's the trade-off, I guess, or the pros and cons of being yourself. It's
Well,
what your success, it's what made you successful. And it's what has also brought you this situation. So yeah.
it's like the sign at Disneyland, that says you must be this tall to get on the ride.
Yeah.
Well, I am. I'm on the ride.
Right.
So
Right. 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 And they're not going to
hang
stop
on.
it in the middle to let you off, and nor do you want to get off it. Right.
No, sometimes you just have to throw up.
Right. So, okay, let me ask you, I want to do a little quick Q&A, a fan Q&A for you, which
Okay.
I'll ask you in a second, but I want to just get to my last question that I normally ask. Two parts. The first one is, what is the image that people generally have of you? Like, who do they think you are?
Um, well, on the one hand, I believe they think I'm a fairly straightforward, authentic guy. On the other hand, many of them are confused because TV is an immensely powerful thing. And no matter how many times I say it, when you look at Dirty Jobs over and over again, and it's been on 500 times a year since 2013, you would assume that I am a handy guy who is very capable of doing what my grandfather did. And so, because I run a foundation that revolves around the skilled trades, that further bolsters this belief that I am a tradesman. And I am only in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I approached my career like a tradesman on the advice of my pop, but I can't build this desk. I can't. The list of things I can't do that people assume I can is mind-boggling. And even though it's no secret, when people who love Dirty Jobs, love it, find out that I used to sing in the opera or sell things on QVC, the cognitive dissonance is real. And sometimes if those people might disagree with me politically or disagree with me on something else, then they think I'm fraudulent. So it's a weird mix. The cognitive dissonance that arises from the disconnect fueled by the optics of Dirty Jobs is in direct opposition to the authenticity people ascribe to me when they see me being forthcoming on television.
That's a very unique situation. Yeah. And complex.
Complicated.
Right. I guess that's one of those things too, that after a while of that happening, you started to figure out like, oh, what is going on here? But it does get tricky. And I guess some of the politics probably too, right? That's where
Right.
that must get messy and confusing and complex and misunderstood all the time, I would think.
Well, everything is political today. Everything.
Right. Today of all times. Yeah.
Right. And
Yep.
look, you can look at Dirty Jobs, and if you're on the left, you might see a straight up love letter to manual labor and a nod toward the unions and attaboy for the worker. And all of that's true. But if you're on the right, you might look at it and see an homage to entrepreneurship and a love letter to small business and sacrifice. And that's true too. So, yeah, people assume a lot of things about me based on that show and based on the foundation that I run that aren't necessarily true.
Well, that's interesting. Okay. So the second part of that question is, who are you really?
Mike Rowe.
And who's Mike Rowe?
I
wasn't going to let you off that easily, Mike.
Well, I'm the oldest son of John and Peggy Rowe, both of whom still love me, but not as much as they love each other. I am a former student of Fred King, who used to stammer, but then found his way. I'm the grandson of Carl Noble, who told me I could do whatever I wanted to do as long as I got a different toolbox. And ultimately, I'm a guy who hosted a show called Dirty Jobs that paid tribute to all three of those people, and gave me permission to run a foundation that so far assisted over 1,000 kids get the training they need to become a skilled tradesman, the very thing that I set out to do, but couldn't on account of my own limitations. I'm that guy.
Nicely done. All right, let's do some fan questions real quick, and then we'll wrap up. Good. Sure. These are from your Facebook fans. The biggest question was, are you going to run for president in 2024? That was like the big question.
Absolutely. No, I'm not going to run. Look, I could barely run for another season of Dirty Jobs. What am I going to do in DC other than piss off half the country? You know, I mean, look, modesty aside, it's very flattering, but I've seen after 12 years with the foundation, I can move the needle in a more satisfying way, to be selfish about it. I just don't think the political environment today is ready for the likes of me. It's got to go splat first.
Okay, so the second most popular question is about your personal life. They want to know, are you married? Will you ever get married? What do you think about marriage?
I'm a huge fan of the institution. The problem for me was my grandparents and my parents both set the bar so high that I think, in hindsight, I may have been a little intimidated by it. Um, but by the time I met the woman I'm with now, um, she was in no great rush, and I was very busy, and we were both a little older at that point. And so, in some ways, I think the decision kind of got made for me. The kid decision did. Um, and I don't really mean that. I made the decision myself. I just didn't do it consciously. Uh, but yeah, big fan of the institution. I've never been married, and I honestly don't know if I ever will. But it
Okay.
doesn't mean I'm not a big fan of the institution.
Okay. Got it. Anne would like to know if
I'm a
you
big
could.
fan of prisons too, by the way, and I have no intention of going to one of those.
Oh, good. So Anne wants to know if you could sit down and have a beer with anyone in the world, dead or alive, I'm going to add, who would it be?
Dead or alive? Well, in no particular order. Uh, Abraham Lincoln, Jesus Christ, or Jesus of Nazareth, I suppose, at the time. I don't know why I'm thinking about three, but
Yeah, you can go with three.
Jesus, Lincoln, and I think, nah, gosh, there's so many. I should have a better pat answer for this because all I do is write about people on my
There are
podcast.
too many is probably the problem.
That is the problem. It's the dirty jobs. You do 300 of them. Mike, what's your
Yeah.
favorite dirty job? I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I just spin the wheel and talk about wherever it lands.
By the way,
So
that was one of the big questions too, but like that's not I know how, because this is what I do. I know I can't ask that question.
you can ask
That's
it.
tough.
I have no idea what's going to come out of my mouth, but
Yeah.
I'm going to
Yeah.
say Abraham Lincoln.
Okay, Abraham Lincoln. Good choice. Would you ever consider hosting Jeopardy? Gaetano wants to know.
Man, I've gotten maybe 1,000. I've seen 1,000 questions at least about Jeopardy. And I hosted a game show years ago called No Relation. That was on Fox. We did 40 episodes of the thing, and I liked it. I like it's a very efficient way to work. And if I could continue doing what I'm doing now and host Jeopardy the way we used to host that show, which would mean really going to LA twice a week
Yeah, a
and
couple of
shooting 10.
days.
Yeah, you shoot 10 episodes over, 2 days or sometimes one day. You can get a lot done. I might, but nobody's
That seems
asked.
interesting too, because you're like I think you're a well-read person, you know your stuff, you're interested in things. I feel like that would be a good fit for you.
Well, we've been talking about game shows, and of like what would a game show look like that I was hosting, and it would be trivia based. It would probably take place in a barn or a factory floor or maybe movable sets that all looked like work. I think that would be fun. I
Yeah.
don't know that it would make sense for me to put on a suit and tie and stand right where Alex Trebek used to stand and say potent potables for 400. You
Right.
hate to you don't want to imitate the last thing. And he left, some pretty big shoes to fill.
Yeah.
If I could do it the way I wanted to do it, then definitely. But if they wanted somebody just to replace Alex and keep everything else the same, I don't think so.
Ed wants to know, what brand of Scotch, bourbon, or cigars do you like?
Interesting. I'm currently flirting with doing a line of bourbon myself. I'm a big fan of bourbon, and
Creating a
I'm
line.
creating a line. Yeah. Yeah. I'm really, really close. I'm going to decide this week probably. But uh, as far as what's out there, up in my cabinet right now, I have Blanton's. Blanton's has a little horse on the top, Kentucky bourbon. I also like Basil Hayden. I also like Bullet. I just realized I'm attracted to bees suddenly. Scotch I used to love, but I haven't had it in a few years. I think the peatiness of it I went through a peaty stage, and now I'm more about the bourbons and the gin. When it gets warm outside, a good gin and tonic,
Okay.
preferably Plymouth gin, which just happened to be the favorite of. Have you been paying attention, Karen?
This is a theme today. So yes, for anybody tuning into just the fan Q&A, there's much more about the theme in that book in the long interview. Who inspires you? Karen wants to know, which is similar to Lori's question, who do you look up to? I like that question.
Well, you know, I don't really look up to people that I don't know. And the people that I know best, you've never heard of. So,
But you
you
can
know,
say them. That's fine.
oh,
But tell me who they are.
well, I look up to my mother immensely. I'm a unapologetic mama's boy. Um, you know, best-selling author at 80.
Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
does that? You know, she was and is incredible. But who, what was the other one? Oh, who
She's
impresses
great too. I
me?
watched you on that video. You posted a video, a Zoom call of you were talking to your parents. It was really cute about
Yeah.
well, there was some marijuana stuff in there.
Oh, yeah, right. God, that thing went crazy. Yeah. Um,
I'm forgetting what was at the beginning, and that was the end of the conversation. But yeah, I mean, you can tell, you can see your mom and you, a special relationship, and you were pretty heavily influenced by her, I imagine.
I was. I mean, certainly I've mentioned a few. Fred King, Dick Clark also changed the trajectory of my life during that game show. I was
Oh,
just telling you
personally?
about it. Yeah. Yeah, he gave me a bit of advice. Real simple advice. He didn't say much. He was going to host the show, but he had just started his production company, so they hired me instead. And on the first episode, I walked out on the stage and I said, "Hi, everybody. I'm Mike Rowe. This is no relation." And I went into the patter. And he came up later. He said, "Look, Ed, you're natural. I like everything you're doing. But one thing, you walked out and you said, 'Hi, everybody.'" He said, "I get why you said that. You're a broadcaster and we're talking to millions of people, but that's not how they see you. You're talking to them. And when you say everybody, you wreck that. Just say hi." I'm like, "Of course. Of course. Why wouldn't I just say hi?" So when you start thinking about that, you know, it changes the way you interact
Hmm.
with a group, with an individual, and certainly on TV.
That's also something that probably stayed with you. Got that early on, early-ish, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
that you brought with you.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So you
Yeah.
really take in these nuggets that people give you.
I try to, you
Yeah.
know, but you never know when you're getting a nugget. You only really know it. Some exceptions, but for the most part, you it's very rare when something happens in your life and you go, "Wow, that's it, game changer." You know, it's like every time I've really truly come to a significant fork in the road, I'm looking back at it and I'm
Yeah.
realizing, oh, that was the time when blah 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 blah.
Totally, of course. And that's hindsight is not only 2020, but the insights come later. But then, boy, and I wonder if Dick Clark knew that you took that with you in such a way. I don't think they realize it when they give you a nugget, they don't necessarily know that, decades later, even you could be living your life, part of it based on that nugget. And it's kind of a shame. Like, too bad he didn't know. Or did you tell him at some point?
No, we weren't really close after that, but it's so true what you just said. The great the great privilege for me today at this point in my career is that I do hear back from people, many people that I've never met, some who have gotten a scholarship through my foundation, and some who were just fans of the show and heard me say something on a TV show and took it to heart, like
Yeah.
really took it to heart. And, I get letters all the time from people who tell me about a specific episode of Dirty Jobs that fundamentally changed their life. Um, I meet people. I met a kid in the airport the other day. A kid, he was 24 years old, but he was telling me he used to watch my show when he was 10. I'm like, oh my God. And he said, "You did an episode with a steel worker that put me on the path that I'm on today. Worked as
Yeah.
an iron worker for 5 years and then joined the Marines.
Yeah. So you are lucky because you do get to hear those things.
Advice is like giving advice is like throwing a baseball. Once it leaves your hand, it's bye.
Yeah.
It's gone.
Best and worst advice that you got from your father. That's from Tim.
Wow. I mean, so much great stuff from my dad. I think, well, we talked about it earlier. It's not really advice, but the way that he made it clear that his wife was more important than me, that was a big deal. And like we said, you don't always recognize the big deals when they happen, but looking back, that was huge. It's also tough to beat the word duck, which he advised me to do one day in the backyard. There were some people over and we're playing horseshoes. And I heard my father yell, duck. I didn't know who he was talking to, but because I recognized the voice and because he used such a crisp, well-modulated baritone, and because he infused it with a touch of urgency, I didn't question it. I simply ducked. And the horseshoe that whizzed right over my head hit my friend, Chuddy, knocked him unconscious. He's okay. But
Oh, too
so,
bad he didn't hear the same, listen to the same advice from that voice.
it's interesting. He heard it. He heard the voice.
Yeah.
But, I took my father's advice at that moment in time, not because it was excellent, although it was. I took it because I recognized the voice as a trusted source.
What's another good lesson that you figured out about life?
Don't confuse efficiency with effectiveness. We're in love with efficiency right now. Everything is about wringing every last dime out of every single thing. But efficiency, if you take it to its logical conclusion, is the province of robots. Effectiveness, you can be an efficient therapist or you could be an effective
Sure.
therapist. An
Yeah.
efficient
Yeah.
therapist, right, takes in more money than she spends, runs a tight ship, right, everything's buttoned up, everything's ordered. But do you actually do any
No.
good?
No.
Right. So it's easy to confuse efficiency and effectiveness, and I could do
Right.
a whole hour on the examples from dirty jobs. A lot of lessons around that. Uh, Teamwork. Teamwork is highly overrated. It has its place, obviously,
Uh-huh.
but like any of those other bromides or successories, teamwork is uh, it's one side of a coin. The other side is
Right.
individualism. Whatever team just won the World Series, good for them. But every single individual on that team gets paid a different salary because it's not really just about the team. So there's a great rumination on teamwork, passion, efficiency, effectiveness, innovation. Innovation is another one of those companies are in love with it. Up here in Silicon Valley, every single company wants to brand themselves as a great innovator. Nobody, on the other hand, wants to brand themselves as a great imitator, because imitation, as we discussed before, is derivation, and we really diminish an old idea that's really just been repurposed. But the truth is, if you repurpose it well, if you can imitate in the exact right way, well, then you too are part of another coin. Innovation on one side, imitation on the other. The innovation that allowed this thing to come into being, this smartphone, is
Yeah.
incredible. And it's the thing that Apple wants to talk about more than anything else. All the innovation that went into this thing. But it was the imitation that allowed billions of them to be made and shipped and distributed and so forth. And if you don't have that, then you just have the one thing, and that's called a prototype. What's more important, the innovation that allows the vaccine to prevent corona, or our ability to imitate the business of getting it into everybody's arm?
Sure. I do think it's very interesting how you do seem to come up very readily with these. I know you said that you're not into navel gazing and all that. And maybe that's more internal, personal, or whatever, but you really are like a philosophical, analytical person, I think, who does reflect quite a bit and then figure things out or theorize about a lot. Yeah,
Who was it? Was it Kierkegaard, The Unexamined Life? I mean, you can't be so inward that you really tip into full on self absorption.
sure.
But man, what it's the most tiresome people I know are the ones who never subjected themselves to any internal rigor, you know?
No question. The most interesting people to talk to, at least, are the ones who have. Absolutely.
If you look, there's this whole level of, getting to know you, what do you like? If you can tell me who you are and what's important to you, that's all interesting. Nothing gets fascinating though until you tell me why. For a fake host who's really a guest or an avatar trying to get through a dirty job, yeah, I got to know what you're doing. That's the job. I need to know who you are. That's the biographical part of the show. But if I can figure out why you're doing this in a way that doesn't come out as a lecture, but just through our own interaction, then, you might be offering something that's actually nourishing to a viewer.
Fully, exactly what I'm after. Did we get to the why today, do you think?
And you started with the why. You came right out of the gate with the why.
If you're interested, I'd love to send you a really famous mug. Do you have
Oh.
too many mugs and junk in your place?
I got this thing that I got from a Murray McMurray, a chicken hatchery about 20 years ago. I'd be happy to break in something new.
Okay, so I will have one sent over your way. Would you like a really famous mug? You can get one. Just click on this card right up here or in the description down below. I put an easy link where you can get one. If you like this talk with Mike, I think you will love my talk with Jeremy Wade. Yes, Jeremy Wade of River Monsters. I put a link right up here, so you can just tap on that, or you can click on the link in the description below. I put one there too.